Panel discussion about racism and discrimination in Oulu. We will be talking about how inequality affects the societal participation of all citizens in our city. This panel discussion is part of UNIC CityLabs, the European University of Post-Industrial Cities. UNIC is an alliance of 8 European universities that strives for societal impact and inclusion. In UNIC CityLabs, members of our academic and civil communities discuss and solve the societal challenges of post-industrial cities. So, my name is Junko Tanaka. I'm from Japan. I'll be a moderator this evening. I'm a master's degree student. The course is Education and Globalisation. So let me introduce today's panelist, Boby Mafi. Hey, thank you. Is a researcher of racism and anti-racism and a teacher of education and globalization at the University of Oulu. Boby came to Finland in 2008 from Zimbabwe. Thanks. Hey, and Jamal Awad is an interpreter and head of the Migrant Council of the City of Oulu. Jamal is also active in the local politics as Deputy City Councillor and representative of the City's Welfare Board. He came to Finland in 1997 from Somalia. Thank you for Jamal. And Ahed Hussein is a project manager at the Startup Refugees here in Oulu, a DJ and social justice activist who wants to lower the barriers for people of color in Oulu. He came to Finland from North Sudan when he was 8 to 9 years old.
Hi.
Yes, hi. Welcome all and happy to have you here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our panel today is bilingual. I will be moderating in English and Jamal will answer in Finnish. The video of this panel will be translated to at least to Finnish and English afterwards. So let's start discussion. Boby, as a researcher, how would you shortly describe what the terms racism and discrimination mean?
Well, racism is all about a relationship of control, power, domination, and I think it is a very, if we are talking about racism specifically, it is a very close relationship with slavery and colonialism. I can actually say racism is the afterlife of slavery and colonialism, even though in some ways we may think that those two processes ended centuries ago or decades ago, but we are now living through its afterlife, and racism is mostly an expression of that afterlife. And the reason why I want to think racism mostly as a social and political relationship is that then it frees us to see how complicated it is and how it affects people in many different ways. For instance, if you're a woman and you're black, you have two categories that place you in a certain way relationship with racism. You're at a woman on Monday and then black on Tuesday. You live these at the same time and they affect you even though in different ways. So by thinking about racism as a political relationship, as a power relationship, then we are able to open up racism to understand it more broadly and how it relates to these other issues like gender, sexuality, and things that are related to it.
Yeah, thanks. So to like Jamal and Ahed, you both work with marginalized group. What does racism look like in Oulu?
Joo, jos mä vastaan suomeksi, niin no, mä oon itse asunut tällä hetkellä noin 11 vuotta täällä Oulussa. Asuin aluksi tuolla, muutin Helsingistä tänne työperässä. Rasismi täällä näkyy sillä lailla esimerkiksi, jos haet työpaikkaa ja sulla on samanlainen tutkinto kuin kantasuomalaisella, niin jos nimi näkyy, että olet niin kuin, ulkomaalainen, niin mieluummin työnantaja kutsuu haastatteluun niin kuin kantasuomalaista. Rasismia myös näkyy kadulla. Ihmisten katseesta näkee sillä lailla, että et ole suomalainen, että et ole täältä päin. Ja myös esimerkiksi julkisella, että ensimmäistä tarkoitan niin kuin bussilla tai esimerkiksi ihmiset saattaa töniä vaan ihan niin kuin noin vaan, että näyttääkseen, että olet erilainen, etkä kuulu tänne. Semmoisella.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jamal about like how racism like is shown like that. But I want to kind of expand on the point you talked about, you know, discrimination in work opportunities. So I'd like to kind of bring up this work angle and how I've seen it. I see it as like, you know, when not only this, what you said, like somebody applying and then you have like a Finnish name, so you know the employer might automatically take the Finnish person, but there is also from recruiters there is also this sort of like you know, clinging to this language question. I guess we can touch on the language question as a little bit later more, but like, you know, clinging to this language question. So we're talking about language requirement. Whenever someone is seeking a job, the language requirement comes up. And I've talked about this with many people from many different backgrounds and immigrants from, you know, who immigrated here for different reasons. But always this language question kind of rises up. And when we talk about language, I think it's something that isn't static. So, you know, people cannot learn a language if they don't interact with other people. And if you don't have access to stuff like to opportunities like a job or so on, so how can you know, learn the language or so on? Another thing you talked about, you know, how it's seen in the streets, you know, people pushing or so on. And I think it's that, but also the hate speech. You know, not only in the street, but also online. Many people, you know, they practice the hate speech and they practice it online because it's easy. You know, you don't see the person and so on. But of course, it happens also like face to face. But those 2 points, I guess. But what do you think, Boby, about this? Do you have anything to kind of add to that?
Yeah, not much. I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think the language thing is really complex. In that, I think there's an expectation somewhere that you should be able to speak it fluently, which may not be, like you are saying, it can become a vicious cycle. In order for you to speak it fluently, you have to be able to practice somewhere specific where you can apply those language skills and benefit and then have a living. So it becomes something that is that is completely it's a vicious cycle that somehow there has to be an opening. How do we break this? How do we give people access to both so that you can learn at the same time and also work? What level of proficiency are we talking about? Can we, for instance, be able to lower the expectations so that we give people an opportunity to learn?
Yeah. Thanks. Boby, like you also mentioned that before coming to Finland, you thought of Finland as an example of free and liberal society. Did reality meet expectations or not, or how so?
Well, yeah, I think it's a complex situation where some expectations probably were met, but some were not.
Yeah.
I think I was pretty naive. I'm a Zimbabwean, so I'm part of the empire, the British Empire. So the way we were taught about the world was always the Western world was always the norm, the model. The development is there, knowledge is in the West. Everything that we had been doing, and it took me quite a long time actually when I was here in Finland to unlearn all those assumptions that I had. And all that I've been taught. My education, like when I look back right now, I used to think that we have a very revolutionary and a very good education system. But now I realize how much it repeats the same Western stereotypes about ourselves. And so when I came to Finland, I thought, yeah, I'd known Finland through the media. I didn't have any like particular friend or person like that. So mostly through the work of Matti Ahtisaari, I think, when he was mediating in Namibia. So my view of Finland was like, oh yeah, this is a wonderful liberal place where you can just go there and become an equal human being. And when I came here, I think like some of us have already pointed, like the very core of this discussion, that one of the surprises that I had was it took me a lot to have a face-to-face encounter with racism, like 3 months. And then it happened at the wrong time. I was going to work, it was early in the morning, then suddenly I meet someone, and it was summer. Meet someone who was pretty drunk, and they tried to actually attack me. I had to do something, and he ended up kicking my bicycle, and I was so shocked.
Yeah.
And it made me try to think about, is this what I signed up to? Which is something that I did not, it was not at the back of my mind when I came, like, well, this is a very nice place. Of course, in some ways, it is a really nice place, and you meet people who also cooperate, who try to understand you, who try to learn from you where you're coming from. I've met wonderful people as well, but I've also had these anecdotal moments where you have to stop and say, oh, this is different from what I had expected. And my view of Finland right now is that it's more complex than what I had when I came here. That, yeah, Finland is still part of the Western world. It's still part of the structures that the global distribution of labor, that, you have to work your way through and you have to struggle. And there are these things that we're talking about, like there is racism, and you have to find ways, creative ways of trying to go around it, and maybe striking alliances, finding friends who can help you along the way.
Yeah, thank you. I'm also I've been for 2 years from Japan to Finland, and I have a lot of nice experience in Oulu, but I've also have seen a bit racism situation, not straight to me, but some other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to do some?
I think this. I just want to kind of expand on what you said, because
Please.
I feel like, again, when you what you said, I kind of fully understood it, but coming from a different angle, like how I kind of see myself and perceive Finland, I feel like growing up here, you just kind of grow to this reality that this is my home in a way, and I feel like I don't know anything else than Finland in a way. You know what I mean? But I also have this understanding of what you've experienced, so it's sort of like this kind of middle ground where you're like, okay, this is my home, but constantly being reminded from the outside that wait, this is not your home. Miten Jamal, haluaisitko sä lisää tähän?
No mä oon sama, itse asiassa te olette sanonut jo kaiken, mutta mä oon samaa mieltä teidän kanssa. Ja, no aluksi se on totta, että silloin kun on itsekin on muuttanut tänne, niin tuntui, että okei, vihdoinkin pääsin tavallaan niin kuin kotiin ja rauhallisen isän luokse ja rauhalliseen maahan ja niin edelleen. Mutta taas kun sitten heti kun olen aloittanut koulun, niin silloin oli näitä skinheadia ja niitä skinejä ja niin edelleen, niin koulukiusaamista ja koko ajan N-sanaa käyttämistä ja päivittäistä semmoista niin kuin kiusaamista, niin silloin tuntui, että vaikka mä oikeasti tulin niin kuin sisällissodasta, niin tuntui, että miksi mä tulin tänne, teeksä? Se tuntui sillä lailla ja kasvaa niin kuin siinä. Niin kuin,
että ei parantunut tilanne, vaan niin. Tuli uusia semmoisia haasteita.
Niin kuin uusia haasteita, että tuntui, että niin kuin sillä lailla, että mä haluaisin niin kuin olla nyt, aloittaa niin kuin uudelleen ja uutta elämää tässä maassa, mutta kuitenkin taas tuntui, että niin kuin koko ajan oli kuitenkin niitä kiusaamisia ja niitä ongelmia, että olen samaa mieltä. Aluksi se tuntuu, mutta kuitenkin näihin asioihin tottuu ja sitten itsekin siihen ajan myötä niin kuin viisastuu ja ymmärtää ja sitten ymmärtää myös tätä yhteiskuntaa, millainen tämä suomalainen yhteiskunta niin kuin toimii, niin että kyllä, olen samaa mieltä teidän kanssa.
Kyllä.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, usually.
No, actually, exactly. So you agree with us in a way. I personally don't have anything to add, but I would like to kind of bring this. I think we kind of touched on the first question, but we didn't get to kind of go that deep with it. So I would like to kind of bring us back to there, if that's okay with you. So just few points to kind of connect this with the previous topic. So this. You said like the skinheads and how the skinheads were visible and so on back in your days. I feel like nowadays this skinheads, well, of course with the Soldiers of Odin and 2015 and all of those activities, they were visible there, but then now they're back again in the kind of like the hiding mode, and it's kind of like scary also, like the political spectrum of everything. So all of these alt-right movements, these racist movements who have infiltrated some of the political decision-making processes, like Perussuomalaiset, I guess, and other parties like that. How do you feel about that? What do you think about like this Boby?
Yeah, I think one of the things that maybe we didn't make clear at the beginning, that I was talking about race being, maybe if you think about gender, if you think about sexuality, they intersect with the whole construction of race. But nowadays, especially the issue of immigration, it's very much seen from a very racial point of view. It's another way of creating these people whose lives don't matter. Specifically through the ways in which immigration is viewed. And I think immigration itself, the reason why I want to mention it, because it has become a hot topic politically. So it is used to mobilize support to actually seek now which direction the parties would want the country to go. And so in a way, I'm happy that we're having this conversation, because I think for people of color, whenever you approach elections, the issue of racism becomes really central, because these people who are coming from parties to campaign, they really raise the temperatures, the emotions, and then the attacks start to be more frequent, and the language, the violence that they use in their campaign. So in a way, yes, I think it is a very hot political issue, and I think that's the very visible side of racism, like you said, that we meet in a very violent way, and you can't even make a mistake about it. The other side, of course, is because racism is not always intentional, it's not always conscious a thing that people do. Sometimes it's because we are part of a system. We are part of a global distribution of labor that we have no option. You just belong there.
Yeah.
We are part of a history that we are taught, and it's not. I don't teach myself history. I have to parcel and then try to see what is it that they said. What are the lies that they said in our history? But all the history is not. They're not objective facts, and they're coming from a specific point of view, and they wanna take the world in a specific direction. So we are part of that, and sometimes we people do internalize those things, and then when we do interact, it's kind of subtle. It's not like you're in your face, like I was talking about when I was attacked. Like, of course, the job thing that we are talking about, this is kind of subtle and a little bit hidden.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of, you have to pay very close attention and see where it goes.
Expanding on this hitting kind of angle of things, like, you know, it reminds me of this, how like through my work I've sometimes seen that people kind of get discriminated from, you know, basic services, like, you know, you're an interpreter yourself, so you know, people being kind of like, I had this case where, you know, a person was not, like, he was visiting a doctor and the doctor didn't want to kind of serve this person just because the doctor felt like they don't speak, they don't want to be bothered to have a interpreter and so on. So, you know, this kind of thing, it's not hidden, it's in your face too, but it's sort of like this kind of, it's built there. Yeah, but I want to kind of talk again about this hate speech. So it's so scary to see that, you know, in media now with Corona and the COVID-19 pandemic and so on, like, you hear some of these politicians coming out and saying stuff like, you know, this happened in Turku. I wish that, you know, this community that's living in this neighborhood would get Corona so we could get rid of them. And then these people say it out loud. So the threat, you feel like they are threatening you, and they're there, and you see them, and they are part of the political kind of decision making. Of course, at the moment they're in the opposition, but in a way they're there, and you always hear of them and see them.
Yeah, like I'd like to know a little bit more about, like, as you all mentioned about, like, hidden walls. Could you tell us a bit more about hidden walls to you, Jamal?
No se on enemmän tarkoittaa sitä, että vaikka niin kun sä käyt niin kun, vaikka terveyskeskuksessa tai käytät muita Oulun kaupungin palveluita, niin jos olet maahanmuuttaja tai se on niin kuin sanotaan, että tummaihoinen tai muutenkin maahanmuuttaja, niin ihmisen niin kuin automaattisesti niin kuin katsoo sillä lailla, että sä et ole niin kuin täältä päin, sä et ole suomalainen, sä et ole niin kuin, että, ja ne rupeavat puhumaan jopa englantia sun kanssa, vaikka niin kuin saattaa olla, että sä oot syntynyt tässä maassa ja yhtä suomalainen kuin se henkilökin ja oot käynyt armeijassa ja tehnyt yhtä paljon kuin hänkin. Mutta se on semmoista, vaikka se yleensä niin kuin, ei se välttämättä se henkilö tahallaan tee, vaan se on se, miten niin kuin ihmisiä on, niin kuin on kasvatettu ja miten niin kuin tämä yhteiskunta niin kuin katsotaan niin kuin maahanmuuttajia ja ulkomaalaisia.
I think the hidden walls are kind of related to these bubbles, you know, sort of like an acculturation in a way. So the hidden walls are related to how much you get to interact with the predominant culture in a way. Those were very good points that you mentioned, but kind of like, I guess in some groups you might feel welcomed and sort of like, yeah, this is where I was always supposed to be, but whenever you're in other situations, the hidden walls kind of come up, that you feel like you walk in a room full of white people and you feel like, okay, there is something going on here that I don't necessarily see. It's also kind of related to work life in a way, you know, that you can get to certain levels, but after that, there are these levels that you might not get access to just because you know, you might look different. And that's kind of like one kind of way to show that. I guess it's also kind of like you have to always prove yourself, you know, that you belong here. You have to always you know, every time you meet a new person, you have to explain your whole story and then prove to them why you are here, why do you exist in this place. And it really kind of, I understand that people might be curious, but and I try to kind of see when it's curiosity and when it's kind of like that. And I think that, you know, this doesn't mean that for the people that are watching, if you're interested in someone, like someone's background, it doesn't mean that you don't have to ask it, but it's just sometimes it come off a little bit like I have to always prove myself and why I'm here and who I am and explain my whole background story. So it really gets it kind of hits you over the long period.
Yes. Like as maybe like Jamal and said, and also you said about like doctors and healthcare things.
Yeah.
I've also experienced that, like I called the doctor like hospital, like public hospital, and then the like phone the call center is just automatically replied, so it's only in Finnish. So I couldn't understand like maybe I need to place 1 or 2 or 3, but
it's
I don't know
guessing
which
game.
one. Specific, so
this is part of it. So things are kind of like modeled towards this generic Pekka, who you know they see it as this. All of the services are kind of modeled based on that. But I think we've kind of like as a society we're catching up to this, and minorities are slowly getting to tell their opinions about that. But that's a very good point, you know, that accessibility is very weak at some points, and this leads to this democratic participation. So the elections are coming, and many people, you know, don't have similar language skills. You know, let's say you've spent 3 years here, 5 years here, even 6 years, and you haven't been acculturated enough to acquire the Finnish language.
Sure.
So in a way, you cannot participate in politics or get your voice kind of heard. But I think, Jamal, I want to kind of get the point from you. You've been working with this minority council or the Council for Immigrants. So how through your work, like, do you have any points on that? The political participation, I get, like.
Jos mä vastaan suomeksi, niin no se tämä maahanmuuttajaneuvoston tarkoitus on, niin kun, että niin kun auttaa maahanmuuttajia niin kun, tai osallistumaan niin kun yhteiskuntaan, päätöksentekoon, ja että he ymmärtäisivät, miten oikeasti niin kun tämä Suomen politiikka tavallaan kun toimii. Suuri osa maahanmuuttajista, tai esimerkiksi erityisesti, ei suuri osa, vaan erityisesti ihmiset, jotka ovat tulleet niin kuin tuolta turvapaikkahakijoiksi, niin he ovat tulleet samoissa maista, missä ei ollut demokraattia. Niin yleensä vaikka he vaikka 5-6 vuotta he ovat täällä, niin silti tuntuu, heistä tuntuu se, että silti, että ne ei ymmärrä, että niiden äänellä on oikeasti merkitystä. Että se on se, mikä niin kun me ollaan yritetty nyt ja myös näissä vaaleissa ja kertoa ja kouluttaa maahanmuuttajia, että jokainen ääni on tärkeä ja sinun äänikö on tärkeä, että sä voit sillä äänellä vaikuttaa tässä yhteiskunnassa.
Kyllä. It's good that you mentioned this. I just want to kind of catch on this one point. You mentioned helping. So it's supposed to help immigrants and teach them. So personally, I come from a field that it's always related to this helping and teaching. And I feel like this is something to kind of understand this power dynamics in this helping and teaching people. So this is also related to the discrimination and the racism. It feels always like, you know, these people, it's a very heterogenic group of people, immigrants, and they're assumed to be this homogeneous group of people. And it seems like, you know, politically and even like in society, it's always like this, they are being helped. And there is the helper, and the helper is always this white Finn or
Hierarchy.
it can be whoever, but like there is this hierarchy of helping, and
Yeah.
and that's not sustainable. Like it means that, you know, society doesn't see minorities as equal because they always need to be helped.
Help.
So, you know, we need to reach a point where, of course, there are people who need help, but we need to kind of understand this power structure there,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, helper and the helping. But what do you think about that, Boby?
Yeah, I think you mentioned you two mentioned a very important point that part of racism is creating a hierarchy of who becomes a human being and who is maybe does not quite become a human being and who probably is not even a human being. So in that sense, if the very idea of creating this hierarchy is such that some other people are seen as not having any agency at all, so they just become objects that can be exploited, of course, because they do have agency, but it's hidden, it's not accepted, it's not acknowledged. There is a reason why people think that people who come from Africa, for instance, are objects of charity. It's because they are not they don't have this access to humanity. They are not seen as human, like the standard of humanity is a white male, a heterosexual guy, and everybody else has to be measured to that. And when you think about why somebody has always to be always helping. And in that sense, like you're saying, it's always a one-way street. It's always this dark guy who has to learn, and it's never the other way around.
Yeah.
And part of my research right now is to try and figure out how this happened, especially during the 70s, and I always try to go back there. 60s, 70s, if I think about the resistance movement, the rebellions that were happening in the Caribbeans and the British colonies, there was during that time one movement that was specifically dealing with this kind of how do we learn from each other in terms of those who were resisting colonialism in Britain and those who were rebelling in the colonies. And there was quite a good mess up there. People like C.L.R. Jones, James, people like Fanon. You can mention there were quite a lot of guys who were kind of interpreters. And I'm trying to think about a model of anti-racism that can work like that, that maximizes cooperation, that maximizes this two-way kind of learning. I learn from you and you learn from me as well.
Yeah, it's very good that you mentioned colonialism. In the beginning, when you defined racism, I wanted to kind of jump on that topic, but I was feeling like it's too early to kind of touch that point, and I feel now at least we can kind of go back to that point. But like, I really see it like this, and I want to kind of get your point of view too, and you Jamal, that because we exist in this capitalist, like a capitalist system. So the capitalist system in itself, it kind of encourages, you know, what you said, making someone, dehumanizing others, and so on. It's about the resources. Also, you know, as you said, like, or I want to say this, like, you know, capital doesn't come just from somewhere. It has to be like all of these Western countries, all of their capital hasn't come just from somewhere. It has come through colonialism and exploiting Africa. And the whole of the world, like Latin America, Asia as well. And if we think about history, the U.S. Industrial Revolution, how that would have not happened without the exploitation of Negroes, Africans, and slavery, exploiting natives and their, you know, resources, and so the system, the whole system that we're existing, it encourages exploitation. It assumes that there is always this competition, and where there is a market and there is a competition in the market, and somebody always needs to come on top. Somebody needs to win, and this then creates this. This kind of links back to this racism, where you need to put someone in a situation where they're beneath you, so you can be the one who comes on top and exploit them. And kind of like to bring this a little bit closer to Finland, we went, you know, to colonialism, US and so on. I see that in Finland, sort of like the most vocal racists that I come across are usually typically people from the working class, people who they themselves are being exploited by this system, and they look for the someone to blame, and that someone to blame usually tends to be someone who looks different to them, because this is how the system has taught them. They feel like, I'm not getting enough resources, it must be someone else who's taking these resources. Oh, it's this person who looks a little bit different to me, that must be them. So we always tend to kind of like search for a reason for or they tend to search for a reason for their own bad situations. But well, what's Boby's angle on this?
Well, I think the whole capitalist system, we can't divorce it, because capitalism is about making profit, immediate profit. So it's not itself divorced from the processes of colonialism and slavery, like you said. I think what I find said specifically now, in this specific moment we are living, is that what neoliberalism does is this emphasis on competing, it fragments society as a whole. It says you are an individual. You are there to fight for yourself and probably your family. And we don't realize that as individual as we are still dependent on other people. And we still have to care about those other people. And if we just start competing against everyone else, that's where the situation that you're talking about comes into. We are just fighting for jobs. There's no time for me to think about my African brother. I have a job. Okay, so I'm done. I've won.
Secured.
Yeah, not knowing that I can go far, but not any further without the support of my other African brothers.
Exactly.
So the idea that we are dependent on others is something that the contemporary capitalism is destroying, and solidarity does not hold much these days. Like, there's very little solidarity. And I think in terms of thinking in anti-racism terms, like there can never be anti-racism without solidarity across the color lines,
right?
Across classes, across genders, across. It has to be a well broad-based movement. And I'm thinking that one of the reasons why it's so difficult to do what the people were able to do in the 70s was there's a very aggressive form of capitalism that makes it difficult to cooperate and show solidarity to brothers who may not look like me, who may not come from where I come from.
But I want to expand on that. I think also that there can be anti-racism without anti-capitalism. They're also connected in a way. So if you're not willing to see the system as it is, then how can you call yourself anti-racist in a way?
Yeah.
But
thanks. Yeah. So, like, I would like to bring this conversation to more like daily conversation culture.
Okay, yeah, we took it a bit, too far.
Yeah, I'd love to know more, but it's more like daily conversation culture in Oulu, and also as you mentioned about the municipal election and politics issue.
Yeah.
So, for you, do you think can all groups participate in democracy in Oulu, or how do you think?
I think I can take the first turn.
Yes.
I think not all group can. I don't think all groups can participate. I think it's not just accessible for everyone. And another thing is the acculturation. So when you arrive to a country, you interact with the predominant culture, and after some time you either integrate or you are indifferent to the whole thing, and then if you're in that indifferent zone, this means that you're not interested to participate in anything that society has, and this leads to alienation, etc. But since at least in Oulu City does not, in my opinion, pay so much attention on accessibility, language-wise. Even if you look at the city, websites, the city services, I feel like accessibility is not just quite there where it's supposed to be. So, since there isn't information out there for everyone, it's really hard for everyone to participate in this democratic process. But I think that that's something that needs to be fixed. Not in a way that let's teach these immigrants about democracy, let's teach these immigrants, not from that kind of hierarchy from above, but just kind of like through community work, through you know, mutual aid-ish activities where, you know, the community itself comes together and tries to kind of, because I don't think, you know, a white person will coming and I don't believe in that. I believe that, you know, the community should kind of work together. And now we're not talking about one community, we're talking about a lot of communities. Oulu is a university city. We have people here. Sometimes I feel more international in Oulu than actually going to another country. Like you meet all kind of people in this city, and it's very, very interesting in a way. But the accessibility is just not quite yet there.
Well, I agree with that, like the idea, and also how about Jamal?
Joo, no jos mä sanoisin, niin se, tietenkin se vähän riippuu myös ihmisten taustasta. Että on sellaisia ihmisiä, jotka ovat tulleet aikuisina tänne, ovat luku- ja kirjoitustaidottomia. Heillä on vaikeuksia tässä yhteiskunnassa, koska ensinnäkin kielen oppiminen ja erityisesti suomen kieli, mikä on erittäin vaikea kieli, se kestää pitkään. Ja sitten sen lisäksi, että suomalaisen se on sellainen, ne ei kovin hyvin tule lähestymään tai eivät lähesty niin kuin maahanmuuttajia. Tai siis mä tarkoitan niin kuin puhumaan tai keskustelemaan tai niin edelleen. Niin nämä henkilöt, jotka niin kuin tämän ikäisenä ovat tulleet, niin tämä saattaa olla jopa ikuinen tämmöinen niin kuin ikuinen
este.
Niin, että kestää niin kauan kun vanhenee ja jää niin kuin eläkkeelle tähän maahan. Niin se vähän riippuu, se niin kuin mä sanoin, että tilanteesta ja taustoista. Ja taas on niitä ihmisiä, jotka on hyvin koulutettuja ja nopeasti pääsevät niin opiskelemaan suomen kieltä ja hankkivat ystäviä ja pääsevät nopeasti töihin. Että se vähän riippuu ihmisten, mistä ihminen alun perin on tullut ja mikä ikäinen se on ja niin edelleen.
It's very good that you mentioned, you know, this different, you know, people are different. We're not talking about a homogeneous group. It depends on the person and how they take part in this. But I think again the one important point to think about is the acculturation again. And I think from the point of view of, you know, decision makers, understanding this process. Why do we have people who you said, you know, people might come here as in an age that they're old, they're not educated, they might be coming from a background where they, you know, can't read or write. I fully understand that, but I think again, why don't? But because I don't think it's only this group of people. It's actually I from conversations that I go through with people, I feel like it's not just that kind of group of people. There are also highly educated people who feel alienated. There is also, you know, people who are come from a mixed heritage, or people who are adopted who also feel alienated. Yes. So we cannot just simply put it as, you know, it's up to the individual. I think society and decision makers also have an impact in this. And coming back to my point, which is the acculturation. So how are we expecting people to integrate? Since, you know, the integration in a way, I feel like it doesn't mean it's a one-way thing, but I feel like from, you know, decision maker, it's seen as a one-way thing. From the schools that I've been through, it feels like a one-way thing. So there needs to be kind of like a change in perception of acculturation and how people, you know, interact with each other in Finland. But what do you feel, Boby, about this? Like, is it Jamal came with this point of view of, you know, it depends on the person and the situation, and I come from this.
Yeah, I think it may be the little bit of danger is that I don't have real demographic numbers, but I do appreciate what Jamal is saying, that for people who come here older, it's probably a little bit difficult, and we're coming from a completely different political system. But people do have kind of different interests in participating in politics, and what I think, like you said, it's more about how do we build belonging, or how do we avoid the alienation that you're talking about. Once people feel more belonging to a society, a community, many activities that can be done to make people feel like they belong, over and above the language. I'm encouraged by the fact that I literally get a note towards elections to say, now election time is around, and this is how we're gonna vote. It's unfinished, but at least it's a starting point. We can build upon it and say, how do we make it more effective? How do we make people feel more belonging so that they can participate more? For instance, how are people organized in their sub-communities? Like, I know the Somali people are very well organized, the Somalis in Oulu, in Helsinki. Those are very good stepping stones. You start from there, from these sub-associations where people meet as more or less smaller groups, and then political issues are thrashed there, issues arise there as well, and then you can take them forward. And I think the situation at the moment is such that it's not very encouraging for these political sub-associations to take their participation to a higher level. Like the debate itself is very alienating, because it says right there that you have to be careful with these immigrants and what they do. But I feel like there are issues that are going. There is an improvement ever since I came here. For one, I think I have a friend who is a candidate for the Green Party. Like I was, and it gives me. I've been voting for many years, but I think now I just really have to.
we have a friend who's a candidate here too.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a candidate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now you get like free.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
do you want to move forward? But
yeah, but like we also like need to care about the times.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to continue this like conversation and discussion, but like I feel that like this topic is quite difficult, and we have a lot of like different opinions and perspectives there, and but I would like to like end on a positive note. So I have one more like questions for you. So since you've all lived in Oulu for a long time, from your perspective, what has improved in Oulu, and what do you like to see happen next? Not in like politics and not only about it.
Why not?
Yeah, about
Joo.
Jamal.
No mä sanoisin, että Oulussa nyt niin kun, on julkiset ajoneuvot, bussit, taksit, siivoojat, näkyy aika paljon maahanmuuttajia. Itse asiassa se on iloa silmille, minulle ainakin erityisesti. Ja tämä on niin kuin tapahtunut viimeisen itse asiassa 1,5 vuotta. Ennen oli ehkä muutamia maahanmuuttajia niin kuin näillä aloilla, mutta nyt niitä on paljon ja niitä lisääntyy koko ajan. Samalla tavalla kuin Helsingissä ja niin edelleen. Että se on minun mielestäni se on hyvä asia. Se saa sen tämmöiset, niin kun kantasuomalaisetkin näkee yleensä maahanmuuttajia syytetään siitä, että ne on työttömiä ja ne ei tee mitään. Ja, mutta kun kuitenkin kantasuomalaiset niin kun näkee myös, että julkisellakin työpaikoilla on myös maahanmuuttajia ja ehkä ihmisten niin kuin mielipide maahanmuuttajiin niin kuin muuttuu. Että se on ehkä mikä mä sanoisin, että on parantunut tai on näyttänyt viime aikoina hyvältä.
So I have to kind of agree with you with your point about how immigrants are more, visible and visible in employment. Like, you can see them in jobs where they are like visible, like, driving taxis or using the bus or driving buses or, cleaning jobs. I agree with you. It's a huge like step forward from, before that, they were limited to these jobs which are not visible, like the cleaning jobs where, you're there in the background. But I want to kind of like, again, expand on this. I think from my point of view, where I deal with people who are seeking employment, I see that although this is very good, but at the same time, is it good really that people are getting only cleaning jobs, only taxi jobs, and only bus driving jobs? Is it really that like it's good, but I feel like it's not good enough still.
Agree.
And also, like, it's good that you mentioned this taxi thing, because in our first point, or the second point, I wanted to kind of, you asked me how does racism and discrimination kind of show, and I want to kind of like bring it from the point of view of many taxi drivers that I know, that it shows in the way of how, for example, clients, when taxi drivers are in the queue, Finnish clients would walk up to the queue, they would look, who's the driver? Oh, it's a black person.
Really?
No, I'm not jumping in this car. Oh, it's this person looks like an Arab person. Nope, I'm not taking this car. And they look for the Finnish person. Some people in many customer service jobs, you experience clients who are rude, who do bad stuff. So, and you just have to deal with them. But going online and starting these scenes and like hate speech mission about stigmatizing all immigrant taxi drivers are as bad, and so on. So you see that from white and Finnish people, and that's a very kind of, that's just one point that I wanted to kind of raise up about this, how you actually see it. So people get jobs, people finally make it to the job markets, they get jobs, but they still face the discrimination and racism. But again, to this point, so is that enough? Is that enough that people get taxi jobs or cleaning jobs? Because people have other ambitions and dreams, and when you limit them to only these jobs, I know that it's a step forward, but I still think that, what do you think about this, Jamal?
No ensinnäkin tuohon, jos mä tuun takaisin siihen, mitä sanoit, että aluksi kun maahanmuuttajia sanotaan, että tee töitä, ei mitään, niin sitten taas he pääsevät töihin taksikuskeiksi, vaikka he olivat vasta 4-5 vuotta Suomessa. Siis se tarkoittaa, että oikeasti he ovat yrittäneet parhaansa, että nämä testitkään ei ole mikään helppoja, että heidän piti itse yksin käydä tekemässä niitä testejä. Ja sitten taas kun he pääsevät töihin, taas niin kuin äsken sanoin, että niin kantasuomalainen kännissä oleva saattaa, niin silloin kun katsoo etsi taksia, niin saattaa etsiä kantasuomalaista, vaikka maahanmuuttajia takseja on siinä jonossa. Että sä oot aivan oikeassa, ja mulla itse asiassa on lähetetty useita videoita, että ne on videoineet, miten niin oikeasti niin käytetään N-sanaa, ja että ei makseta heille edes, että poliisia ei edes makseta sitä, maksaa taksikyytiä, ja poliisi jopa niin kutsutaan paikan päälle useasti. Se on totta. Mutta se on totta, että päästään niin taksikuskeiksi ja bussikuskeiksi ja niin edelleen, se ei riitä. Tietenkään ihmiset haluavat niin mennä eteenpäin, haluavat luoda uraa, ja nämä on yleensä nämä, jotka näitä hommia tekee, suuri osa on nuoria miehiä. Ne haluavat aluksi tämän kaltaisia hommia, ja sen jälkeen opiskella ja mennä eteenpäin elämässä ja saada parempia työpaikkoja.
Kyllä, exactly. Like you said, like it's the first step, and from there, people want to kind of improve and I think and move forward. But I still feel like with this rakenteelliset, how do you say that in English? Like with these how discrimination, racism is built into the system. I feel like I don't feel so positive about kind of like the possibilities to move forward and access better job opportunities. Unfortunately, I have to disagree in a way, but as you said again, we're there, we're moving forward, and I'm first of all, I want to answer now the first question that you asked. I'm very happy that we have this opportunity here to discuss, and we have different kind of people here discussing. At the same time, I want to kind of point out that that racism and discrimination is not just faced by black people. We have in this panel 3 black men.
men.
Black men. So
yeah, I know.
and
I noticed that.
and in a way, I want to kind of point out just from the media and what has been happening in the previous days. You know that in Finland, I feel like Romani people are have been facing for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years a lot of this discrimination, and you know, I feel like as in the future we should include different kind of people, because we face discrimination. We are kind of like, we're there, we face it, but there are other groups too who face discrimination daily when they go to the store with security following them.
Yeah.
I'm so privileged as a, you know, a young black person who speaks Finnish and so on. Like I'm good, but you know, not the best situation, but I'm good. But you know, kind of like feeling solidarity with the Romani people and how they have been here for hundreds of years, and they're Finnish. They still are alienated, and kind of like their question of their equality is pushed away, and so on. So active participation of different kind of groups of people, and also acknowledging that Finnish society has been discriminating and been racist towards groups who have been here in this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. Not only the Romani, but also the Sami people, and how they have experienced colonization with their native areas being, you know, taken away and so on. So the question is actually bigger and bigger than that. Immigrants have come here since the 70s, 80s, you know, and people from Africa, Somalia came in the 90s and so on. So the black man is visible. You can see him. You can, you know, or the woman, you can see them, and you can, you know, point your aggression towards them. But Sami people, you know, they are also, they need to be kind of heard too. I'm not taking, you know, I don't want to kind of take this in a way that, you know, that black voices or some other voices are important than other. I think all voices are important, but just wanted to kind of point that there. But
like,
to go back to that, like what should be, what I hope for the future, I think I hope for this kind of situations, occasions where, you know, different voices can be heard, and open discussion, and I guess people kind of coming forward and being actively anti-racist and anti-colonial, and hopefully also anti-capitalist in a way. But
yeah. Thanks. So yeah, like, would you like to
maybe briefly that I mean, as somebody who has been going to the university for almost for a very long time, I think I'm really encouraged by the number of students that I see, specifically in the Faculty of Education, that there has been an increased number of people of color, and I'm also encouraged by the the quality of research that they do in terms of relationalities. I don't know how, but there have been quite a number of master's theses and PhD theses that have dealt with issues of multiculturalism, issues of immigration, integration, but it's still a little bit fragmented. And I think going forward, I would say if the university could have at least one more comprehensive, Vesa is proposing something of that sort at the moment. I don't know how far he goes. That really looks at a more comprehensive picture of racism, and like you're saying, including that cuts across not just people of color, but also you talk of the Sami and the Romani people. I would want to see more research along those lines, and how more students, Finnish students of color, can be encouraged to do university education, and what kind of assistance they may need to have professions that other than cleaning, and participate in a way that they feel like they are being valued and they are contributing the maximum that they can to society. So yeah, in one way it's encouraging. I think I would say that we have had the initial steps. We have had the starting points. The question is, how do we build upon it? How do we increase this kind of solidarity amongst all the groups that live in Finland? And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do, like I've already mentioned, this is the second time I'm saying it, and probably I won't say it again, that I'm trying to figure out how do you increase this kind of learning from each other, from many kind of groups, and consolidating the solidarity that we already have. And that if we can have more forums like this that involve a lot of people, I mean, different groups of people and different other issues, this is a starting point, I think, and it's encouraging.
Yeah.
It's very good that you mentioned there, like, you know, the university and how the university can kind of help with this. I think that I might come from an angle that I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm very pro quotas, actually. I think that we should have very clear quotas, that we have this amount of Afro-Fin professors, this amount of Afro-Fins or other, you know, people of color in university. I think that change won't happen by itself. We can stay here and talk about these topics for so long, but, and I understand Finnish society is very egalitarian. So we, you know, the law allows a certain amount of, you know, privileges to everyone. Everybody's equal and so on. So I feel like, you know, in places where decision makers are, once you mention something like quotas, they go like, whoa. We don't know, that's against, oh no, that's going to put other people above, oh no, we don't want that. But that's one tool to kind of actually push for change, and change that comes hard and fast. Of course, in the private sector, it has to happen by itself, but you know, the public sector is one way to show example. We can talk so much about how we would want, you know, to get more jobs for people of color, to get people of color more involved, but if there is no straight actions that are taking, then I feel very pessimistic about the change. And that's one thing that, you know, university can do. You know, bring these people, bring marginalized and groups into that environment by introducing quotas.
Yeah, thank you.
Jos mä lisään vielä siihen, niin te olette itse asiassa aivan oikeassa, ja mä oon aina puhunut siitä, että esimerkiksi maahanmuuttaja-asioissa. Yleensä mä oon aina sanonut, että myös niin kun, yleensä aina on niin kun, siihen niin kun, tavallaan niin kun, johtajana tai päällikkönä siinä toimii aina kantasuomalainen. Niin kun, mä oon aina puhunut siitä, että on esimerkiksi Oulussakin on niin kun huippukoulutettuja maahanmuuttajia, niin he voivat olla niin kun, myös niin kun, päättäjiä ja johtajia. Ja miksi pitää aina olla niin kuin kantasuomalainen, aina niin kuin on aina maahanmuuttajat, sitten kantasuomalainen taas niin kuin niiden tavallaan niin kuin johtajana. Että jos tätä ajattelutapaa minun mielestäni pitäisi muuttaa, ja että pitää ymmärtää myös niin kuin maahanmuuttajatkin pystyvät tätä samaa työtä kuin suomalaiset ja kantasuomalaisetkin, että mä oon täysin samaa mieltä, että enemmän pitäisi rohkaista ihmisiä niin kuin kaupunki tai yliopisto, tai että rohkaisemaan, että he ottaisivat niin kuin yliopiston professoreita ja johtajia, ja niin onneksi ensimmäiseksi mä oon hyvin tyytyväinen, mä hyvin usein käyn tuolla Ousissa yliopiston sairaalassa, niin siellä on niin kuin paljon maahanmuuttajia. Siellä näkee somaleita, siellä näkee virolaisia, venäläisiä, Kiinasta, että hyvin niin kuin semmoinen monikulttuurinen työpaikka.
Ympäristö, kyllä.
Thank you.
You know, what you said, no, just to say,
yes,
but like,
okay.
just to kind of like bring you on board what you said there about this, that, you know, that there are a lot of educated people, but they are not, you know, giving the opportunities. They are just there, and you know, they don't get the chance to participate. That's very unfortunate. And also from the work I do, you see it there too, that, you know, decision making about immigrants, even on the higher level, you know, when you go to give a comment about this to a ministry or whatever, you know, it's always these people who are white who want to decide for how we should help these immigrants, but the people of color themselves are not really that involved once it goes to that higher level. And I encourage whoever's, you know, watching, who might have power to influence this kind of stuff, to kind of like introduce quotas, or give people opportunity, give people voice. People ask all the time, like, oh, how can I stop anti-racism? Well, you're always talking. You're not giving voice. You're not giving opportunities or voice to others to kind of tell you how they feel. It's always, you know, a white person talking about how we should help immigrants.
Like, unfortunately, it's already up time. The time is
Okay.
So sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, it's like I know this topic like cannot stop, like, and also we cannot finish in 1 hour.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you so much. Like, I'm really happy to know your own opinions and perspectives so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you,
Thank you.
Bobby, and thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Ahed.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you very much.
So thank you everyone once again for joining us and here at the studio and at home. This has been a discussion about racism and discrimination in Oulu as a part of UNIC CityLabs. Stay tuned for more UNIC CityLabs events where the societal challenges of post-industrial cities will be discussed further. The next UNIC CityLabs will be a panel discussion in Finnish in Suomi Arena on the 14th of July at 1 p.m. Suomi Arena is the largest Finnish event for societal discussion and democracy. The discussion about how the university and city can strive for more inclusive society will be continued there by a panel of local and national decision makers and representative of an NGO and members of our university community. See you there. Bye. Thank you.